Never in the history of mankind was so much stolen from so many by so few. Opt out with Bitcoin. Let's discuss. So what I just quoted at the beginning of the video is from Andy Yee, and he is a top-level Visa executive. And he actually tweeted this out just yesterday. And why did he tweet this out? It's due to the Fed Chairman Powell and what he announced yesterday, which kind of came and went, didn't really affect Bitcoin that much, but there are a lot of people coming out that is really afraid of what this means going forward, what inflation is going to do to the economy, to fiat. So what happened yesterday? Well, Chairman Powell announced a major policy shift, what he calls average inflating targeting. Well, what does that mean exactly? Well, in the past, what he and others have tried to do is keep inflation at 2%. Somehow there was a consensus that 2% was right, that you should have 2% inflation every year, which means that all the fiat that you have, the dollars you have, gets devalued by 2% every year. That's exactly what it means. Inflation 2%, that means there's 2% more money coming out every year, basically. And what you have is worth 2% less now. So it was announced by Powell that 2% is no longer enough. That for the first time in a very long time, if ever, he would like to see inflation go above 2%. 2.25%, 2.5%, 3%, we don't know. That is why this is a major policy shift, that he actually wants inflation to increase even faster than it has been. And to quote, many find it counterintuitive that the Fed would want to push up inflation. However, inflation that is persistently too low can pose serious risk to the economy. So why is not having enough inflation or inflation that's too low bad? Well, according to Powell, it can lead to unwelcome fall in longer-term inflation expectations, which in turn can pull actual inflation even lower, resulting in an adverse cycle of ever lower inflation and inflation expectations. Why is lower inflation bad? I mean, you have to be a financial expert, economist, to really answer that, because for me, I don't get why you have to have a 2% inflation rate. Why can't you have 1.75 or 1? You know, why do you need to have this ever-growing inflation or keep it at 2%? His explanation in terms of if you don't have enough and then long-term, you're going to have lower inflation, and that's bad. But still, that doesn't really answer why it's bad. And a lot of people do not agree with Powell, which is why I led with this. Andy Yee is a Visa executive, and you know Visa is not too fond of crypto or Bitcoin in general, although they're looking at blockchain technology, they're testing it out. Jerome Powell's speech today will be for the history books. Never in history of mankind was so much stolen from so many by so few. Opt out with Bitcoin. So basically what he's saying is, if you don't want to be caught in this game, you don't want to see your fiat devalue basically to nothing due to inflation, well, go with Bitcoin. And he's not the only one. Raoul Pal, Chief Executive Officer of Real Vision, to quote, I think gold and Bitcoin will rise over time in inflation or deflation. Most people don't understand the latter, but simply put, Powell has shown that there is zero tolerance for deflation, so they will do anything to stop it. And that is good for two hardest assets, gold and Bitcoin. Powell wants inflation. And even the Winklevosses are jumping on this. So to quote, the Fed under the leadership of Jerome Powell continues to be Bitcoin's biggest booster. He made a case on Thursday for 500,000 Bitcoin as ultimately the only long-term protection against inflation. And he goes on and explains that the price of Bitcoin could appreciate 45 times from today's price, meaning it could hit $500,000 per coin or even higher, at least according to one of the Winklevoss twins. Of course, You got to take that with a grain of salt since they do own Gemini, but still, a lot of people are feeling the same way. Just a few weeks ago, you had the ex-Prudential CEO, George Bell, come out and say you should buy Bitcoin out of the blue. He was one of the biggest bears. He even said it. He did not believe in Bitcoin or blockchain. But now he's coming around because he's basically saying the Fed can't continue what they're doing. They can't prop up the economy forever. There will be repercussions. And what he's talking about is inflation. And he's saying to buy Bitcoin. He even gives a date that people should start buying Bitcoin after Labor Day. And before him, Paul Tudor Jones also got involved with Bitcoin. He says almost 2% of his assets is in it. To quote, if you take cash, on the other hand, and you think about it from a purchasing power standpoint, if you own cash in the world today, you know your central bank has a valid goal of depreciating its value 2% per year. So you have, in essence, a wasting asset in your hands. So think about it. Paul Tudor Jones was talking about 2%. Now Powell is talking about increasing that, possibly to 2.5%, 3%, who knows, maybe even higher. That means your fiat is wasting asset in your hand and it's depreciating whatever the inflation rate is. And to continue, he said Bitcoin, on the other hand, isn't subject to the whims of government spending. And that is 100% true. That is why so many people believe in Bitcoin. They see it as a hedge against inflation now. And they're doing it because distrust in the government and what Fed is doing, Fed Powell in particular, and people are gearing up, preparing for the worst. And the best way to do that is buy Bitcoin. And now you also have publicly traded companies coming out and saying the same thing, that they're trying to prepare for inflation. Out of the blue, a company called MicroStrategy, which is the biggest business intelligence company out there, they're calling Bitcoin and crypto superior to cash. Basically, they're preparing for inflation, and they moved all their funds into digital currency to hedge against inflation. That's a big deal. So what do you guys think on Powell's decision to increase inflation? And can you answer why not having enough inflation is bad? If you can, make sure you leave your comments below. Thanks for watching. Hit the like and subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned to my future videos. Bye-bye.